Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise. We bring you interviews with professionals in the movement and exercise field. The goal is to provide information for other professionals and also amateur movement aficionados, people who understand that movement is part of what makes life complete. Some of the people we interview you will have heard of. They're well known in and outside of the movement and exercise profession. Others you may not have heard of, but they have a great deal of knowledge to share. Many people doing the best work spend their time working with people, not working on their social media presence. We're going to give you a chance to learn from some of these talented and knowledgeable individuals, and we're going to learn along with you. Moving to Live podcasts are going to be short. Each interview will be long enough to impart usable information, but short enough to be able to be consumed in a single bout, during your workout, commute, or even during dinner prep. We all like long-form interviews, but time is valuable. Moving to Live wants to give you the option to learn and be entertained without needing to commit 60 minutes at a time for an interview. Give Moving to Live a listen. Check out our sister podcast, FitLab PGH, which highlights people, businesses, events, and activities in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area that make movement a priority. Moving to Live would love to hear from you. Want to connect with us or have an idea for somebody you think we ought to interview? Drop us an email, mov2liv@gmail.com, or connect with us on Instagram and Twitter, both _mov2liv. We're excited to bring you these interviews, and we think you'll enjoy each and every one that we bring you. Welcome back to another edition of Moving to Live. As you heard in the intro, we are a podcast for movement and exercise professionals and amateur aficionados. What I didn't mention in the intro is we try to remove the knowledge silos where the fitness or movement experts who are in one field don't talk to the others. So very commonly, the chiropractors talk to the chiros, the PTs talk to the PTs, the personal trainers talk to the personal trainers, never realizing that the whole goal is to get people to move more, to get people to have a higher quality of life. So we bring a variety of people. And today's guest, I actually was on his podcast a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure exactly how I connected with him, probably something to do with the internet. And he is one of the few people out there, I think, who has owned a CrossFit gym and gotten out of it. So I think that's an interesting story to hear. And he is in the marketing business to help other fitness professionals become better. So Eric Malzone, thank you for taking time to join Moving to Live.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I love what you're doing here. It's funny because I was just having a conversation with a gym owner out in New York about how gym owners tend to work in their silos. CrossFit guys will talk to CrossFit guys. Kettlebell guys will talk to kettlebell guys. Gymnastics people will talk to gymnastics people. But no one's communicating across the board. And it's just the same idea. It's just circulating in these little circles. So I'm a huge fan of the purpose and mission you have for the show. So I'm honored to be on.
What I really like to do for the first part of the podcast, which is actually the first interview, is kind of find out the story. But before we do that, people are going to want to know, who's Eric Malzone? So if you see somebody on the street and you're wearing your t-shirt, or you see him at a conference or in a gym, what do you do? What's the 20-second or 30-second spiel to explain people what you do to bring the dollars in?
Yeah. So, at heart, I'm a coach. And I think that's number one. So I've gone from coaching, people on a fitness level and health level and athletic level to coaching business owners and fitness professionals to achieve their goals and ultimately a life of freedom. So we do that in a lot of different ways, but that's the primary overlooking piece of what I do. I coach fitness professionals, and that's what I love to do.
And I think probably the first way I became aware of you is through your podcast. You have actually two podcasts, a longer one and a shorter one. Just kind of briefly describe, and we'll talk about these in more detail in 2 weeks, but kind of just briefly describe what's the goal of each one of those.
Yeah. So first of all, I've always wanted to do a podcast. It's been a fascinating thing to me. I started a podcast back in 2014, and it was, I interviewed my head coach in my gym. It was a beautiful, wonderful interview, went 45 minutes. And at the end, my assistant asked me, "Hey, what's that blinking light on your microphone?" And I was like, "Oh man, yeah, that's the mute button." So it was just 45 minutes of dead air. So I put it on hold. I'm like, maybe I need to take some time and reflect on this. And then eventually when I sold my gym and started moving on, my business partner, Doug Holt, really urged me. He's like, you should start a podcast. It's a great way to build awareness and you get to do what you love. So I just started doing it. And that was the future of fitness. And, I really, at that time, I would take any person who would talk to me. And, I really wanted to focus on where the industry was going, similar to, thoughts of yours. And, I started asking people, and then all of a sudden Dan John replied. And I was like, what? Really? And I just remember being so nervous, to interview Dan John, and then interviews start coming in. And it's, some interesting things about that is that I find, and maybe you find the same thing, is that the higher the profile the person is, the more likely they are to say yes and come on the show.
I've really been surprised at that too. The people that I've sent it out as a flyer thinking there's no way they'll ever respond have been the ones who've responded the quickest, and also the ones who, without you even asking, you almost feel guilty because they go out of their way to make it easy for you.
Yes. They understand. They understand the value of getting their word out, right? And being known. Whereas a lot of people, and they also have the confidence to come on a show and speak, about their topics. So that's the future of fitness. It still goes. It's gone down from, I was releasing 2 or 3 per week. Now I'm releasing 1 per week. And I'm really focusing on, narrowly focus on online fitness and where technology is going, and people who are taking advantage of that space. So that's my first one. I recorded 80 some odd episodes and released about 67, 68 over an 8-month span. And now I have also the Fitness Blitz podcast, which is Fitness Blitz Radio, which is, a very short 8 to 12 minute preset questions, but questions who are designed to allow people to expand on their positioning and mission within the fitness industry. And I release, I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 weeks, and we've already released 80 episodes. So it's what I do, man. Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's it. I'm just sitting here like I'm talking to you on a Zoom calls and talking to people from all over the world. And it's the coolest thing ever. It's so much fun.
And we'll make sure we have in the show notes links to both of those podcasts. I do have to tell you, Eric, don't feel bad about having the mute button on. I was, for my other podcast, FitLab PGH, we were 76 or 77 episodes in. I'm sitting in a coffee shop recording a lady who was gracious enough to do it. Mm-hmm. And about 20 minutes into the interview, I'm about ready to finish it up. I noticed that there's a little icon on the screen saying not recording.
Oh, no.
So after 70 some episodes, the flash drive decided to crash. Fortunately, she was gracious enough to get another cup of coffee and go through it again. But the technology is great that you and I are going down the rabbit hole. But when it goes wrong, oh my God, there's no feeling like that.
Yeah. It's because someone's giving you their time, the most valuable thing we have, right? And then something that's, whether it's really your fault or not, it's still your responsibility. And then you have to ask them something again. And yeah, it's uncomfortable.
So what I find the most interesting spot about all these podcasts, and I like your Fitness Blitz podcast because I can learn about different people in like 10 or 15 minutes. But what I like to do for the first part of Moving2Live is find out, how did people get to where they are? And I came up with that idea because I always wondered how people that you heard speak professionally, like if you heard Gray Cook speak, it's like, well, this isn't typically the way you'd think of a physical therapist speak. And then as I got older and heard him speak more, I realized that yes, he was a physical therapist, but also at heart, he was a strength coach. So it's like, oh, that really clarified a lot of the things that he was doing. So I like to find out the background of people. So I think you and I are both in the movement, exercise, fitness, whatever the magic term that we want to use or call it. And I find that people come into this one of two ways. It's just kind of always been their passion and something that they've done and kind of grew up being active, or they grew up being unhealthy and the fitness was kind of the savior or changed the quality of their life. So to start out, where did you grow up, and were you active as a kid, either in organized sports or just mom and dad said, get out of the house and be active?
Yeah. So I grew up in, and just as a point of reflection too, I always look, I think a lot of people look back in their story like, well, it's not that great of a story. Until you maybe start telling it a little bit and start getting into the details and find it relatable. Like I didn't have any of those major, until recently in life, and any of those major aha moments, but I was born and raised in Northern California, in a town called Saratoga, which is now right in the heart of Silicon Valley. When I grew up, it wasn't the Silicon Valley. It was literally orchards and things like that. So my father was a dentist. He is, his whole family except for him, was born in Italy. So they came over and he was the last child of his parents. So he was, very, very Italian family. And he worked his way, went through college, went to the Army to get dental school paid for, and started to practice in San Jose, and did the old fashioned way, did a really great job, and was a very successful man. Still is. I mean, he's 81. He's still ticking, doing great. But as far as my athletics and fitness story, I had chronic asthma when I was younger. So it got to be pretty bad, especially the allergies that were in that area. And so, I did all the shots, I did all those things. And, we started going to the hospital more frequently than we would have liked. And I don't know anybody who's had major asthma attacks, but it's pretty awful. I remember it, very distinctly. And so my parents, the doctor suggested that I get into swimming because that really builds lung strength, and it's very free of allergens because you're obviously in the water. And so I started swimming, and then it turns out I was pretty good at it. And so that was age 5 and 6, and I started swimming competitively. And then that's what just started springboarding me forward in athletics. I swam for a very long time. Honestly, I hated it right around the age 9 or 10. And I really started to put on some weight right around that age. I think I was, you and I are about the same age. I was it was the typical low fat, non-fat craze, right? So my mom would this is a true story. When I started gaining weight, my mom stopped giving me Twinkies and started buying Twinkies Light. And that tells a lot about the era. So then, thank God, I really hate swimming. Like, there was points, and if my mom's listening, she's probably not. I used to skip swim practice and wet my hair in the sink, and then wait for her car outside. So it was a struggle. And then I found water polo. And for a lot of people who aren't from California, probably not too familiar with water polo, but I loved it. And then that springboarded me into a career that was about 20 years long. So I went all the way through college, Division I, played for club teams after college, did some international play. And then, for that segment of my life, really since the age of 5 or 6, and I'm 41 now, athletics has been a firm piece. And I always played recreational athletics as well. So it wasn't just water polo and aquatics. It was that. So that's what got me into it.
What I find interesting with people who play or do athletics at a fairly high level is at some point the light bulb that goes on that makes you realize that I can't go any farther. My career is over. All of us do. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough, it was probably much earlier than you, although then I found fun as an age group triathlete and cyclist. But I know I talked to, in an earlier podcast, Don Moxley, who was a Big Ten champion as a heavyweight wrestler. And I asked him, I said, the same question. I said, when did you know, okay, I'm done with my eligibility, but I cannot go up and continue to go because I'm just not good enough to make the world's team or the Olympic team? And he said, he pretty much knew it when he was done with his college career because the best heavyweight wrestler in the world was also an American. And one person went to the Olympics and one person went to the world champions. And he realized that even though he was pretty good, he probably wasn't that good. So at what point did you realize, okay, my water polo career is over? You said you did some international competition, which means you are at a pretty high level. What was the light bulb, or was it a gradual thing? And did you make that decision yourself, or was it kind of decided for you?
So I think it was actually in high school that I realized that I was good. I was a high school All-American, but I didn't have the size. I'm 5'9", right? I'm about 185, which, I'm not a small person, but I'm not big enough to play at the Olympic level, national team level. So I started to realize that, and water polo doesn't have, there's very few people. You have to play at the national team level in order to go get paid after school. I played for club teams that were not paid. So I started to realize in high school, I'm like, this isn't like a professional career. So when I was selecting my colleges and where I wanted to play, I decided to go to a school that I knew I could start right away and have and get to see, like, I went to the East Coast and I used it as a way. I played on the East Coast, and back then Boston College had a Division I varsity team, but then Title IX came through and kind of wiped that clean. So when I was out there, I got to play against a lot of all, I got to start as a freshman. I started all 4 years, and I got to play against all those teams in the Northeast and travel around. And then I was also on the swim team, so we got to travel around even farther. So I saw it as an opportunity to see more things and start and have fun. But I knew I was never going to make money doing it. And I did okay at college. I got some nice accolades. And then after school, playing for Burley Game Aquatics, which was a lot of Division I players who kind of got together, and then we would go enter international tournaments and do really well. Just so our listeners are understanding, is this similar to like club rugby teams that they have? Yeah, similar. Yeah, I would say so. Yes, I'm not too familiar with rugby structure, but I believe that's it. And the thing about I would have probably honestly still be playing water polo on a club level. But when I moved from Northern California to Santa Barbara, there wasn't that structure in place. It was too small of a town. And now definitely, I'm in Northwest Montana now. There's no water polo out here. Nothing going on like that. So I would probably honestly still be playing recreationally. But I realized, late high school that, hey, I'm not going to make any money doing this. I might as well maximize the experience of it and go from there. It's kind of interesting you say I might still be playing. It's either last week or this week. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about a gentleman in his 60s who's still playing water polo. Yeah. Yeah. It's relatively easy on your joints. I mean, I came out of school and I started, I started CrossFit right before the age of 30. It's 29. And my body was fresh. My knees weren't hurt. My shoulders had some issues, definitely some shoulder wear and tear. But my hips were good. Like everything, like you talk to a lot of football players or baseball players, anybody who's in a high impact sport, and they're messed up, by the age of 30. And I came out of it with fresh, pretty fresh joints. So I'm pretty thankful for that. So was the leaving of water polo because you moved away from where the water polo was? And then did you immediately find CrossFit, or was there a time period where it's like, I'm just not active? Yeah. Well, I found CrossFit when I was still in San Francisco. That's where I was living after college. And so that was about 2007. I started at Chris LaLane's gym. So that's Jack LaLane's grandnephew. And it was really interesting. I actually got to meet Jack before he passed. And so I found it there. And then what happened was I got a text message from one of my college teammates, Trevor Bohm. And he's like, hey, do you want to start a gym? And this is back then where you had to text messaging was 777-444. So I was like, wow, that's kind of an odd question. And I thought about it actually during a happy hour. I went to San Francisco on a happy hour on a Friday. And then after a few beers, I was like, yeah, heck yeah, I want to start a gym. So I left everything in San Francisco, just picked up everything and moved down to Santa Barbara, in a town that I had never been to, nor did I know anybody. What were you doing professionally at that time? Sales and marketing. So I did about 10 years of sales and marketing I sold radio ads. I sold, and I did promotional stuff for radio stations. I did real estate finance. I sold online legal publications. You name it. I was just always, I was a good salesperson. I always did well in sales environments because A, it's competitive, and B, I tend to work better with less structure as long as I know there's a number in hand that I need to hit. So that was the background. And I think, what's interesting about it, just not to dive too much, but I think there's two people that get into fitness business. I think there's people who have, or gym ownership especially, people who have a business background and now need to learn the fitness side. And there's people who are great coaches and trainers who get into, they think the next logical step is to open a studio or a business, and they know nothing about this business side. And that tends to be the people that I help now. But I'm one of the more unicorny type people who started with a business background and got into a gym setting and was able to build that. It's interesting that you say that. I know you can read a variety of blogs or Facebook posts online, and there are a lot of former gym owners still working in the field who say the best thing they ever did was sell the gym, because they thought it, as you said, was the next logical step. And then they did it and they realized, I don't really like doing this. I like working with people. I like coaching. And I just don't have enough time to do that and run the business and deal with employees and deal with payroll. And so they get out of it. And on the one hand, some people look at it as a failure. On the other hand, some people look at it as like, well, if you're doing what you like doing,
and you're healthier, as we were talking a little bit before we started recording, that's probably the right decision to make.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting that I've talked to a lot of trainers in the last 3 months. I talked them completely out of opening a gym, because I give them the insights like, hey, if you're doing well as a trainer, because here's a story that's probably all too familiar with a lot of them, is a lot of are great coaches and trainers. And then they start getting, a client will start whispering in their ear, hey, you should own a facility. You can do this. Right. and then maybe they add on, they're like, if you need money, I'll back it. And next thing you know, they're opening a facility. 6 months down the road, they're like, I hate all of this because I'm not getting to train people anymore. I have to work on the business. And it happens a lot. With my gym ownership days over that 8 or 9 year period, I consider it all a success. I built it up. I sold it at a high point. I successfully exited, sold it to my head coach, who's still running it extremely well, and it's still there and it's still thriving. So for me, it was time that I needed to expand outside of my 4 walls, and I wanted to do something bigger. And my wife and I want a mobile lifestyle, so we want to travel while we build my next business.
How much do you think it was beneficial that before opening the gym, you were involved in a sales job, which I know because radio is reducing in the number of people who are listening, so it was probably pretty competitive. How much did that help you? Because how many gyms are there in a given town? And even to this point, how many, if you're talking just specifically about a CrossFit gym, how far do you have to go from one gym to another? I mean, I know I live I'm about 20 miles from downtown Pittsburgh, and probably in a 10 or 11 mile radius, I can name like 7 CrossFit gyms alone, probably 8 or 9 yoga studios, 2 or 3 Pilates studios, a couple of big box gyms. Mm-hmm. And I know in Northern California and Southern California, where the population density is a lot higher, is probably even more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sales and marketing background was absolutely crucial. I mean, absolutely crucial. The ability to sell anything, is number one. You always got to sell yourself. And, I think there's always a stigma of sales as like, someone's very pushy, but all you're really doing it's the ability to share enthusiasm about something. If you can get someone else to buy into the enthusiasm and share that with you, then they'll probably buy your service and product because they feel that you're generally fired up about it. So, with Santa Barbara is a very competitive market. I mean, there's a lot of money there. I used to joke that, and it wasn't a joke because it was probably true, I could stand on the roof of my gym. It was a 5,000 square foot facility, and I could pull out my pitching wedge and I could hit at least 6 different competitive, studios or facilities in my area. And I think within a square mile, we had 3 other CrossFit gyms. So just giving you an idea of the density and the competitiveness. And we really had to, work hard to differentiate ourselves. And but sales is a big part of it. I felt pretty confident if I could get somebody in my office and start asking them questions about, where they want to go with their health and fitness, that I could get them as a client.
And I'm curious, I know you said you come from the sales background and got into that and then made the successful exit strategy. Mm-hmm. Whereas I know a lot of gyms, they kind of fade out, or as you said, people just realize, I don't want to do this. Yeah. How much of a benefit was it to you to be able to be successful, do you think, looking back now that you're helping other gym owners, the fact that you didn't have preconceived notions because you hadn't worked as a trainer before? We've talked a little bit about how as a salesperson, it's about selling yourself and being passionate about what you do and being able to convince people to essentially pay you money. How much of it is helpful that for a gym owner who's coming from a business background, if they don't have a gym background as an employee? So I think I'm going to answer this question correctly, but when I looked at why I started the business is I always wanted to. My dad was a dentist, but he was a business owner. That's what he did. He was a businessman, and I always saw him working for himself. I also saw the stresses that he went through. When numbers were down. I could see it. You could see it. Or when he had to fire somebody. Oh man, when my dad had to let somebody go, it was weeks of agony. He was just he's such a good guy, and he hated to let people go. So when I got into the business, I got into it because I wanted to be a business owner, and I happen to be passionate about athletics and fitness as well. So it was just a natural fit. So, when I'm coaching people on that,
So say that question again, because I feel like you mentioned
you mentioned a few minutes ago that we have generally two groups of people who go into the gym or fitness facility business. The group who's worked, and you did a really nice soliloquy of somebody whispering in their ear, which is remarkably similar to what I've heard people describe before.
Yeah.
And then there's the person who comes in from the business background. Mm-hmm. So as somebody who came in from the business background as a salesperson who didn't have the preconceived notions, this is how a fitness facility should run, this is what should happen, because you'd never been there as an employee, you'd only been there as a member. How much of a benefit now do you see that as helping you now that you're working as a coach and you see business owners who come from the sales background and who come from the fitness employee background?
Yeah, it was incredibly beneficial. And it still is, because I look at, without the business, there is no training. So to me, the business always comes first. A lot of people say the training, if you're a great trainer, you'll just get clients naturally. And I call BS on that. I really do. I think you have to have a solid business. When I started in 2008 or whatever year it was with Chris Lane, that was my first coaching opportunity. I saw his gym, go from, I think I was member number 27 to 150 in a matter of 6 months, which is crazy growth. And I was just watching, and I was sitting back, and I was just looking how a business structure was done. And I was like, God, I can do this, right? And my business partner, Traver, he called me because he wanted someone who could run the business side and could handle that. So we had a very clear delineation of like, hey, he would kind of handle the coaching and things like that. And he had more of a fitness background than I did at the time. And so, I always look at things through that lens of, okay, is this business set up correctly? Are the, is it set up to actually last? Or just having a conversation with the gym owner right before this about how much he's paying his contractors and his trainers. It's way too high. He's not saving enough for his own. It's not going to make it unless he makes some hard conversations. And it's highly beneficial. I mean, it just depends on the lens at which you look at things. And I always look at things through a business lens first, and then training secondary. I consider that the product of the business. So
I'm reminded every time I read about the fitness business of how many similarities it seems to have with the restaurant business. You've got the people who own the restaurants are either the chefs, which would correspond with the person who's working in fitness, or you've got the restaurants that are owned by the business guy who recognizes, hey, I can make some money, but I really got to squeeze the last lettuce leaf and piece of carrot to make money. And it seems to have a lot in common with the fitness business, because both are essentially luxury services or luxury goods.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting though, when we opened our gym, it was, the business started in 2008. We opened doors in 2009. I don't know if you remember what was going on back then. That was an awful time to open a business.
The economy was tanking. Yeah.
We couldn't get a loan. We couldn't get anything. And I started actually doing some research at the time. And two things that actually went up during a recession like that were alcohol sales and gym memberships. So I think the natural thought would be that it's a luxury item, but I find that once people luxury items would be travel, cars. But once people kind of boil it down to like, I don't have much money, I need to do something. I think gym memberships actually are in pretty good position.
I'm curious with that. Did they differentiate from parts of the country? Because I know California, for example, people are generally much more active, and it's a more active lifestyle than, say, Pittsburgh, for lack of a better term, or better place.
Yeah, I do. I think opening California is its own market in so many different ways. It's very, very, I would say health conscious, but let's just say it's just very, people want to look good in California. That's a big thing. And one of the things, interesting side note, is one of the things I've noticed since we've left California, my wife and I have lived in Oregon, British Columbia, Montana. As soon as you leave California, this underlying feeling of competition goes away. Like it was just this always like, you always feel like you're competing on something you didn't know why. The way you looked, your car, your business, your income. And then once we got out of there, it was like, no one really cared anymore, especially in Montana. Like it's not competitive. It's great. No one cares what you do. Out there it was all about, anyway, that's a rabbit hole I could go down for a while.
I know, I forget who it was that I've interviewed before, but they say people go through not really multiple careers, but multiple phases of the same career. And I think what you've said is you are, for lack of a better term, a salesman and somebody who helps people sell and market. So at what point with owning the gym did you realize, okay, I'm done with this. I've done the straight sales with things not related to fitness. Now I'm in the fitness facility. It's successful. We're doing well. I could probably do this for the next 20 years and we could probably continue to do it, but it's time to start making an exit plan. How did you decide to reach that? And then how did you begin to implement the exit plan?
Yeah. So there's multiple stages of this. I'm put a high value on mentorship, which allows me also to sell my mentorship. I think it's one of those things. If you put a high value on it, then and you buy it yourself, then you're able to sell it. So that's a side note. But one of my mentors at the time was Chris Cooper, and he's big in the CrossFit world. And everything started with, what's your perfect day? When you're building a business, you have the opportunity to, your life is your business. It's really hard to unwrap the two. And, I kept looking, and I would always do this exercise every quarter where I would review what my perfect day looks like. 2016 was a very difficult year for my wife and I personally. We went through a significant amount of loss and just a very, very stressful time. And then having to continue running the business and growing it. What I found was that, Eric, everybody has a stress threshold that they can handle. I look at it as a bucket. You can throw environmental stress, sleep stress, workout stress. You have something where you can't go over. And running a gym is stressful. You just have to deal with certain things on a day-to-day basis, whether it be parking issues or cancellations or your landlord trying to raise your rent. There's always something, right? And do this year of 2016, where we had these personal losses in our life, my stress no longer could handle the little things that it could. Eric's chemistry was different. And that was the fundamental move. So when I started thinking about, okay, that was one part of it. Then I started looking at my perfect day. And one of the things I was doing, which I just do all the time, and my business partner and I, we have to check each other, is we follow squirrels, right? So at the ending one given point, I was doing a corporate wellness program that took a lot of my time. I was launching a new boot camp. I was doing consulting. I was running my gym. I had literally 5 or 6 different things I was doing. And after another conversation with a mentor of mine, James Fitzgerald, he just asked me, Eric, when are you just going to look at your life, dude? When are you going to get good at one thing and just run after it? And that's when then I'm like, okay, perfect day analysis. And I sat down, I came down. I'm like, what do I really want to do? What does my life look like? It no longer involved walking into a gym 6 days a week. And that's when I knew that it was time for me to expand. I didn't know exactly what that looked like yet. I knew I wanted to live in different places with my wife and look at different things. At the age of 40, like I said, with these losses is one of those reflection points of we could go any day. Just like that. I recently lost a friend at the age of 48, just died of a heart attack on vacation in Cancun, body surfing with his girlfriend. Very tragic. And it was another reminder of hey, if you're not doing what you want right now, then really, really think about it and figure out what's really holding you back, because it's really just a series of choices. So all of those things coming together was when it was very emotional for me to say and tell my wife, hey, I want to sell my gym, because this was my identity. This is what I did. This is who I was. This is the community I built. Everywhere I went in Santa Barbara, I knew people, and it was a good life. But it was what Eric in 2009 wanted, not what Eric in 2017 wanted. And I urge people, if you're listening, to really don't be afraid of change, because what you wanted 5-10 years ago may not be what you want now, and that's okay. You can make a change, and it's never too late to do that. I mean, I was only 40. But that's a big deal. It was something I built for a better part of a decade, and just to walk away from it and try something new, people thought I was crazy. They probably still do. So very long answer to a simple question, but it was very complicated. You can see how my mind works. I had so many things going on that it's not a decision I took lightly.
How much do you think that was related to the fact that from everything you've described, you are, as you said, you kind of have the squirrel mentality, not in a bad way, but it's like, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that, I'm interested in this. And if you're running a facility where there are certain things that you can't control the employees as far as when they come into work, when they call in sick. If there's a problem with the equipment, that's you. If the AC goes down, and it's not convenient. Whereas if you do more what you're doing now, where you're your own boss or you have one partner and you're doing consulting, I know just for us scheduling this meeting, you said, well, I can do this Wednesday or that Wednesday, rather than if you were owning the facility, somebody say, I can come in at this time. And as a business owner, you'd say, okay, I'll be there. Yeah. How much do you think that with all the personal stresses, the tipping point was related to the fact that everything or many of the things that you were doing in business were stresses that you couldn't really control because they were part of the business? Yes.
I'm just going to say yes. I think it was a huge part of it. And I think you just nailed it. And just like my mind just blew. I think you absolutely nailed it. I mean, chances are if I was a gym owner still and you were asking me to do this interview, there was a 50-50 chance I'd have to reschedule the last minute, due to, the gym's too loud, or I couldn't get away, or, a coach didn't show up. It's just part of it. I have to say I was very fortunate with the staff I had. It was excellent staff. And, probably only about a dozen times over those 8 years did I get the phone call at 6:02 a.m. saying that no coach was there, which that's the worst. Just the worst. I'll be right there. And so I was very fortunate with that, but I do agree. There's just too many things that come at you from two different directions. And, I also like running a business where I have very low overhead. That's
that means if 2008 happens again, it's much better able to withstand it because you don't need that much to keep going.
That's right. Yeah, man. And going back to like the 4-hour work week, where I'm sure you've read that book.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And a lot of it's BS. There is no such thing as a 4-hour work week, but he makes some great points. I mean, we now live in Whitefish, Montana, which is a beautiful place, but our living costs are 1/3 of what they were in Santa Barbara. And, we did just fine living in Santa Barbara, but if you know anything about that town, man, it's a pretty penny, to live there and have that luxury. So, yeah.
We're talking to Eric Malzone. He's described how he's gone from a youth water polo player to a salesman of ads to a CrossFit gym owner, and how he made the decision that his perfect day no longer involved being a fitness professional who walked into the gym. I think it's an interesting path. I think what he's really hit on as interest is people's interests and career goals change. And I think just from listening to him talk, he probably found that as he got older, he started to value being able to control his time more than he valued being able to bring in lots and lots of money, even though having enough money to do what you want is important. We're going to come back in 2 weeks and talk more about what Eric did after making that leap from owning a facility to running a business where he can essentially live anywhere he wants, but he also has to run down people to pay him so he can do the business. So Eric, I want to thank you for joining Moving2Live for part 1 and telling your story. I'm really looking forward to learning about what you do now, because I know we talked in part 1 here just about the sheer number of fitness facilities and how many of them really don't function the way they should.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Moving2Live. Make sure you check out the show notes for contact information for our latest guest, as well as links about all the things we talked about. Intro and exit music is Traveling Light by Jason Shaw. You can subscribe to Moving2Live on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play, and be notified about new episode releases. Have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Drop us an email, mov2liv@gmail.com. Connect with us on Twitter or Instagram, both _MOV2LIV. Please tell your friends about Moving2Live. It's a go-to place for information for movement and exercise professionals and amateur aficionados who understand that movement is part of what makes your life complete. Until next week, keep on moving.